And we were just like everybody else in the 80s. We had a party line. Everybody knows what a party line is. Well, actually, the young people wouldn't know what a party line is. So let me explain to you what a party line is. So when the phone rings, like, and you take it off the wall, and it's got a cord attached to it. If it rings twice, it's not your ring. It's somebody else that's on the same line. But of course, what that really means is you can pick up quietly and listen in sometimes. So it was really a fantastic life, and I was very fortunate that I was raised in such a beautiful environment, and actually I lived my life and thought it was great and thought it was going to turn out great. I always thought it was going to turn out great. I would be what is termed as toxically optimistic. And so I was lucky that I had good parents, because unfortunately things don't turn out the way you think they're going to turn out. And so I was happily going to college in 1985 and decided at that point that I was going to come home to farm, and I told my dad, and he's like, nope, you're way too young and wet behind the ears to come home, and I'm only 41 years old, so why don't you go work out for a couple of years? So I decided I'll go work out. And then 1 year later, he got cancer and died. And my mom had 4 farms, all touching each other. You know, it was a fantastic land base, and we had pigs, and Dad hated pigs, and I love pigs. We would have made a dynamic combo. And unfortunately, that install ended right there in the spot. And I was forced to make a decision, and it was 1985. So you can imagine what things were like in 1985 and 1986. It wasn't too far removed from 20% interest rates in the 70s, late 70s, and also it was a terrible time for agriculture. Like most of my guys that I graduated in 85, our parents told us, don't come home and farm. Go get a job, because corn is $2.50 a bushel, and anything except supply management was not a good business to be in. So we were all kind of marching in that direction. Sorry, I need to get my book here. We're all kind of marching in that direction, and so everybody was the same. So people ask me, why did you write this book? I could have written in the autobiography the biography that the lady read. She kind of gives away a bit of the things that's already happened to me, but I couldn't have written the book in 2005, which is really when the story ends in the book, because I wasn't ready, because I was still suffering from a lot of PTSD and struggles in my life. I was just bankrupt, divorced, just getting a job, starting to get my feet underneath me, and I wasn't really ready. But after 20 years of getting success and having some momentum, then I felt I was ready to write it. So I wrote the book, and I gotta tell you, my beautiful wife, who you'll see here in a few more slides, I published the book October 2024. She didn't read the book till January 2015. My own wife. And the reason was she was scared. She's like, I don't know if I want to read this book. It sounds kind of awful. But, it was a very therapeutic journey. And what I've discovered since is a lot of people have read the book and really can relate to it, because it's about growing up on the farm and, all the struggles of that entails. But some other real human stuff. And in fact, the people that relate to it the best are 50-plus men, because 50-plus men, they don't ever need help for anything. Everything's always fine. They just work harder. And those guys feel like I've given them a license to share maybe some stuff that's happened to them. So that's a good thing. So, certainly growing up in Huron County, it was a different time. I'm going to read one little blurb from the book here. And I see from the white hair in the audience, a few of you might get this. So our dad was also a very social man. He was always ready to have a beer when friends or family came around. Sometimes this clouded his good judgment, as evidenced by a story that's near and dear to my brother Jamie. Admittedly, the 70s and 80s were a different time, and drinking while driving, or touring, as it's often called, was a popular activity for anyone of driving age. In Huron County, when you asked how far it was from Hensel to Grand Bend, the answer was always about a six-pack for two guys. So the story goes, Jamie was with Dad a few miles on the other side of Zurich, visiting with some friends after a long day of farm work. As it often does, one beer turned into several, and like so many of us Durans, Dad got a little sleepy. When it came time to head home, poor Dad was feeling very tired, so he came up with an idea. He wondered if Jamie could drive him home. Let's keep in mind that Jamie was about 11 years old, and certainly had been driving the truck around the farm like all of us, so in theory, he certainly was able to drive. In retrospect, the question should have been, could Jamie drive Dad home? Instead, it should have been better had the question been phrased, should he drive Dad home? But as all of us kids were aware, Dad had a calculated, reckless side to him, one that I seem to have inherited, unfortunately. Jamie tells us that Dad placed him between his legs so that they were both in the driver's seat. His instructions were very clear. Jamie, you drive through town, straight home, and if you see a cop, just wake me up and I'll grab the wheel. Jamie, of course, as any 11-year-old boy would be, was well up for the job and jumped into the driving seat as Dad rested his head on the seat back. Jamie vividly recalls that within a minute of departing for home, Dad was already snoring like a baby behind him. I sometimes wonder why Dad didn't tell Jamie to drive home via the back roads, which may have only taken 5 minutes longer, instead of driving straight through town on the main highway. Regardless, one of Dad's favorite sayings would come in handy here. It all looks good from the roadside. Truer words could not have been spoken, and I'm happy to report that they both made it home in one piece. So certainly, that was a much different time than what we're living in today. I'm not sure that's better or worse, but it's different. My dad was a really fantastic man. He was the regional director for the Huron County Federation of Agriculture. I got his plaque I received on his behalf after he passed away. I was talking to a gentleman last week who knew my dad, and he said, there's a few people in my life that really have a deep impression on me, and one of them is your dad. And that's 40 years that's gone past, so he really was a good guy, and I was very fortunate to have him in my life. We could have made a good combination. When I started to sell, after I got out of college, I went to college and then I decided to get a job. The first job I got was at Hensel Co-op, selling fertilizer and those kind of things. The hardest customer in the world to sell is always your dad. And so we did manage to sell him some stuff. And I remember he was proud. He didn't want to say it too loud because it was a salesman. He didn't want to give me too much traction there, but he was proud that things were turning out. Moving on, there's a chapter in the book called Acid Fertilizer. This picture, of course, is a picture of corn that I'm sure several of you guys in this room have seen in the last year. And it's funny, when my father passed away, and I decided to crop our farms. And I did it for 2 years. And both those 2 years in Huron County were an astonishing drought. And believe me, a lot of Huron County is light, sandy land. And we had 60 bushels of corn, 15 bushels of soybeans. And it happened 2 years in a row. It was so bad that after 2 years of it, I decided I'm never going to cash crop again. I just quit. And of course, that was a bad decision because it turned out to be just fine. similar to what you guys are going through in this room. Next year's a new year. Bet in 2 years we'll have a flood and we'll say, damn, I wish it would stop raining. So, but funny, back in 1986 and 1987, Pioneer Seeds sold for $70 a bag. I don't think you could buy a quarter of a bag for $70 now. But U.S. corn was $1.65 to $1.85 a bushel, and the Hensel Co-op was paying about $2. So it was a challenging time. But somehow, the cash croppers, and I was one of them, and all the guys I was working with selling fertilizer, survived. It was hard on the guts though. And I'll tell you, that is the number one reason I sunk all my effort into being a pig farmer, because I thought no matter how hard I work, if it doesn't rain, I don't get results. So I just stopped. But anyway, I thought I would share that story with you guys because I know a lot of you in this room, according to a conversation I had with John, you had a tough year, but things will get better. Things will get better, and you can thank your genetic seed companies for you need three rains a year here. You get an inch in spring, an inch in July, and an inch in September. A blind monkey can grow 200 bushels of corn, it seems like, but you need those rains when you get them. So, but I'll read you a little story about acid fertilizer. So this is just after I graduating. I looked up at the job posting bulletin board for graduates and decided I would apply for a few positions. There was some interesting opportunities, including one for a loans officer position at the Bank of Montreal. I believe the starting wage was higher than most other offers, that I had actually had an operating farm loan account at that bank. I thought, why not? I believe from our class there were about 10 of us who applied for that position, but only 3 of us got through the first interview. So Steve and Carl and I were told to go to downtown Toronto to interview at the Bank of Montreal building. With no Google Maps or GPS back then, and having driven in Toronto only twice in my life, finding this monster high-rise building smack in the middle of the madness was quite a chore for the green farm boy from Zurich. But I made it to the interview on time. The elevator doors opened up and Mr. White from the bank welcomed me in for the interview. I was charming my way through things with ease, heading for a certain offer, when the interviewer asked me a simple question. What would be the hardest thing you would have to do in this job, Jody? Having seen the devastation of high interest rates on farms from the late 70s and early 80s, I paused and replied, I guess foreclosing on farmers, sir. That would be tough. He smiled, paused, stuck his hand out. Thanks for coming in, Jody. The interview was over, and my career as a banker, like an NSF check, bounced out the door. Undaunted, I decided to look closer to home and applied to be a crop specialist at the Hensel Co-op. This is quite humorous, considering I didn't know the difference between a soybean and a white bean, but I was going to be a crop specialist. I hooked up with one of the greatest men I've ever known. His name was Mervyn Erb. Mervyn was a seasoned agronomist with a rich pedigree of knowledge around all aspects of cropping and agriculture. He was a sensational salesman who showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning for work during busy times and was always on. I would say that he never turned off. And I learned a phenomenal amount about working the phone. More in the later chapters about that. Customer interactions and the sales process. And most importantly, the fabulous world of crop agriculture. With all this knowledge and enthusiasm, I started to pay attention to the struggles of the average cash cropper. In spite of farmers often being considered eternal optimists, there are always a variety of situations beyond the farmer's control that will affect yields. For example, a wet spring planting will rob extra yields when growing days are reduced. Conversely, a dry spring will stunt the early growth of plants, delay the emergence without soil moisture. The saying goes, the end that The end yield of a plant is made up in the first 3 to 6 weeks of life. Back in 1985, corn genetics were not like they are today. In 1985, there were very few drought-resistant, bug-resistant hybrids, and the standability of corn was a huge issue. Unfortunately, let me explain. If you optimize your soil fertility, planting proper fertilizer application, get your crop planted on time, receive timely rains, manage to keep weeds and pests under control, you might get a crop yielding 125 bushels an acre, or at the top end, 160 bushels or more. Unfortunately, in the fall, when it comes time to harvest, if the rootworm infection decides the stalks will fall down, this means high winds, or worse yet, snowfall. Corn stalks break off halfway up. As a result, a very popular seed was used at the time, provided by a company called Pioneer, whose green hats, coats, and vests could be seen at every farm auction, sale, and even church if you kept yours clean. As a joke would go from one farmer to another with a shiny new Pioneer coat, "Geez, buddy, you got your Pioneer underwear on as well?" And the green-colored man would reply, "Does Pioneer have that now?" So Pioneer and other companies revolutionized farming by creating new hybrids. And then I kind of talk about GMO. Part of the reason I did that was people that aren't farmers are going to read this book. And I had a lot of different ideas that I wanted to put in the book, but I had to trim it down at the end of the day. But one thing that really kind of irritates me is people that think GMO or genetically modified corn is a sad and scary thing. So, unfortunately, I had to give up on my dream. So I farmed by myself for a few years, and then I got married because at the point in my life in 1986 or 1987, I decided, well, if my dad's not going to be here, that I'm going to duplicate his life. I'm going to get married, have 3 or 4 kids, and I'm going to live happily ever after, just like my mom and dad did. Unfortunately, it's impossible to duplicate somebody else's life. And so I got married too early, got married to the wrong lady. She wasn't a farm lady. Struggled mightily with marriage, had 4 kids under 7 years old by the time I was 30, and was operating a farm all by myself, realistically speaking, because she didn't want to be a farmer. And it was a hell of a go. It was a hell of a go. And anybody in this room that's farming with a partner that doesn't want to farm, you're not going to be farming too long. You need to have partners that are all pulling in the same direction. And certainly that was not the case. And so at the age of 35, 36, I decided I'm going to stop this primary agriculture business. I'm going to go get a job. And I had multiple opportunities to take a sales job. And the whole time I was working on the farm, and people would drive up the laneway just like every other farm, trying to sell you stuff. And a few of those guys said, "You should come work for us. You can really talk. You can be a great salesman." And my dad told me when I was a little kid, "Make sure you stay in school, kid, because you're going to turn out to be an underwear salesman otherwise." This was back before Victoria's Secret, so there was no underwear salesman back then. And I don't know why, I just connected salesman and bad. So I didn't want to be a salesman. So I said, no. I kept saying no. And then the worst possible thing happened. I was desperate for another opportunity. And a friend of mine who had a big shiny car and a big house, and he was a nice guy, said, "I got this great opportunity. Why don't you join me and we'll start up a call center in your town?" And I thought the same thing as all you people thought in this room. What in God's name do you know about owning a call center? I'm just a farmer. And he's like, no, you know everybody in this town. You're the Zurich Bean Fest president, you coach kids in hockey, you've gone to your church, everybody knows you, everybody trusts you. I need somebody like you. So I thought, okay, well, it's a job. So, and then he's like, well, what we really want is a partner. And I think you'd be great, which was the perfect button to push, the ego button. And so I invested $125,000 I didn't have and proceeded to start the worst 4 years of my life, where I completely departed from agriculture altogether. And you have to kind of go back to the year 2000. At that point, nobody had a cell phone. The only people who had cell phones were rich people or had a bag phone. And we were selling cell phones in the US. And the reason we were in Canada is because our accent was neutral. So I could call Chicago, I could call LA, I could call New York, I could call Florida and sound like the guy next door. And because we were Canadians, we had that inherently natural warmth about us. So that really helped us sell. We also paid our workers in Canadian dollars and received our income in US dollars. So every time you made a sale, you paid somebody $10 an hour on the phone, you made $50 US. So it worked. It was a great job. It was a great opportunity on paper. Until we didn't get paid by this one client. And in the first year, that was $100,000. And in the second year, that was $250,000. And because of my toxically optimistic nature, I put my foot down and said, this is going to work no matter what. So I went right to zero equity, pushed it all in, and then 9/11 hit. And when 9/11 hit, the world fell apart. Nobody was interested in buying anything on phones. Nobody was interested in doing anything. And we lost our contracts and lost it all. So at that point in my life, I was 15 years married to a very unhappy lady who wasn't happy with this current situation either. And I didn't know what to do. I did not know what to do. I kept pushing and pushing forward and tried a bunch of different things. And there's 5 chapters in the book about the call center. I could have put another 5 in, but you can only deal with so much sad shit. It's just awful. I'll just tell you that. Until I hit the wall. And it was a friend of mine that was my financial planner. As I cashed my last RSPs in, she reached across the table and grabbed me by the hand and said, you don't have to do this anymore. You can stop. And I thought, well, for a second I thought maybe she's right. Maybe I should stop. And I didn't stop, but it did plant the seed. And then I kept going. And to make matters even worse, my mom got killed in a car accident within a month of that. So that was it. That was the very bottom. So at that point in my life, I had to go through the double bottom, or I would call it the triple bottom. I was talking to one of the people that listened to the audiobook, and she said this was one of her favorite chapters. And in this chapter, I'm driving down the road thinking I've got my call center sold, thinking I can get out of this thing with $50,000 at least. I go see this client, this prospect, and I walk into his office and I realize there's no way in hell this guy's buying this place. And I have no prospects left, nothing. And I'm driving home on the 401 with my Volkswagen Passat, considering life's options, and the front tire falls off. And I'm skidding across the highway, back and forth, and the 18-wheelers are going zipping by me, and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I'll get killed here. Maybe I'll get killed, and then at least my kids will get some insurance money. And you know what? The hand of God just reached down and took my car and deked it between all the trucks. And then I eventually hit the gravel and came sliding to a stop, and the tire goes bouncing by. Boom, boom, boom. And the tires on the student like, F you, life is great, you suck. You can't even kill yourself right. And I can tell you, it was the absolute bottom. So at that point, I pulled myself up and decided to go back to one of my clients one of my people that asked me to work for them, and I started to sell. And so I took off like a rocket and did really well and turned my life around, and then I found my next wife, and we have a beautiful life now. So it is possible, no matter how difficult your life is going. We're still lucky to be living in Canada where there's so much opportunity and so many people willing to help you if you're willing to take the help. And so, because it's Valentine's Day, I had to put a picture of my wife up here. And there's a chapter in this book called I Plan to Marry Every Girl Since I Dated Since I Turned 16. And that was really the truth. I would have. I was just desperate to be a dad and be a husband. And it wasn't really until I got with this lady that I think I finally found my real life partner. So I'm going to read you one little bit of the book about her. One more thing, folks. When you see my wife Laura and you ask her about certain sections of the book, like when I almost skidded off the 401 into upcoming traffic, or during various family struggles of my past, don't be offended if you get little or no reaction. The truth is, it's been an incredibly difficult process for Laura to relive these moments with me. She is absolutely the yin to my yang, and I love her and respect her enormously. I could never be where I am today, and I know that it's our differences that make us whole. She can still hardly believe some of the things I've done, and there are parts of the book that are unbearably difficult for her to take in. Have you ever heard someone say, a mother is a real mama bear? Well, my Laura is a real wife bear. She gets extremely protective of me, and it's something that I really love about her. She always has my back, so when she doesn't react the same way everyone else does about some of the stories, it's only because she never wants to see me go backwards. It's thanks to her help that I am truly achieving my full potential. But rest assured, it's a wrestling match on a day-to-day basis as I continue to push, at times, recklessly forward in life. But she's the one who puts the brakes on me for my own good. I love you, honey. So, here's where we are today. Happy to report that we live on a little 3-acre farm. We have our own business, the dog boarding business, and we still look after animals every day. We got 10 chickens, 3 sheep, and a zillion other little creatures running all over the place. And it's great. It is really great. And you can never go back in time. You can't go home, as they say. But it's nice to look after animals. It's something that's in your blood. You can't get it out. And this is our farm today. It's owned by a young couple in Zurich, and they've expanded it tremendously. And I gave a presentation at the Huron County Federation of Agriculture about October, and I became an OFA member again. So there's my sign at the road. So I think you can all be rest assured that if you're going through hard times, and there are people in this room that know I'm talking to you. They're sitting there going, not me, but yeah, it's you. You can get through this, but the point is to ask for help. Okay? Because I want you to enjoy the book. It's a nice book. It's got some really nice parts about it. It's got some really sad parts about it. But there are people around you that want to help you if you are having a hard time. Agricultural Wellness Ontario is, the Guardian Network is every meeting almost they're at, they come and speak, because it's mental health resources for farmers is a real thing. And this is a bit of a shout out to the Lunds here, but a lot of people want to talk the talk about doing stuff and helping others. and not many people walk the walk, but John is one of those guys. John's got the RMP for you guys, which is a ginormous thing, because at some point this, I don't even know what to call it, a train or a roller coaster of the beef business will go onto the downside, and somebody's gonna take a bit of a haircut. So I would say take advantage of the people like John and do your part. Do your part. Do your part to help out, even if it's small. So I will have a display over here at the end of the evening if you'd like to buy a book. As an extra bonus tonight, $100 tonight, plus $5 for every book sold will be donated to the Peterborough Healthcare Resources. I understand you guys are like a lot of rural communities short on healthcare, and so that donation will be happening on your behalf. And with that, thank you very much.